My name is Neta, and this is the video abstract for our paper titled Intergenerational Transmission of Valence Bias is Moderated by Attachment. The paper reports on work done in collaboration between my lab at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and our colleagues James Blair and Nim Tottenham. And what we're studying here is our responses to ambiguity, because in everyday social life, we're often faced with the task of interpreting ambiguity in other people's social behaviors. For example, if you see this expression, you might pretty easily determine that this person is experiencing something quite negative, and this person is experiencing something rather positive. But what about this expression, right? Did somebody just say something that really set her off, or did she just get an unexpected gift from an old friend? So surprised expressions have predicted both negative and positive events for us in the past. And one way for us to get at your interpretation of the valence of this expression is to just ask you what you think. And so in many of the studies that we run in my lab, including the one reported in this paper, people are asked to view these three expressions. Of course, we're using validated face stimuli, and they're asked to say every time they see a face if they think it's positive or negative. Now, one basic premise of this work is that there are individual differences in how people do this. And the dependent measure that we use is percent negative ratings, where each dot on this graph represents a different participant. So you can see everyone sort of agrees that angry faces are negative and happy faces are positive. But we get this huge range of individual differences in response to the surprised faces. And that's what we use to characterize a person's valence bias. Now, another basic premise is that this bias is generalizable, meaning that it's not really just about how we interpret surprised faces, but that this bias drives our responses to lots of different types of ambiguity, including in response to emotional scenes or even words. And so we've really come to think of this bias as a lens through which we view the world more broadly. And a third basic premise is that this bias is associated with important factors related to our mental health. And so the outstanding question that we asked in this new study is, well, how do we come to have the bias that we have? And one factor that we predicted to be important is the effect of the primary caregiver. Now, of course, there's a lot of work showing that a child's cognitive and emotional development is substantially impacted by key environmental factors, particularly their interactions with their caregivers. And so the question we asked is, well, what's the relationship between the valence bias in the child and that of the parent or the caregiver? So we recruited 136 parent-child dyads. They didn't have to be biological parents, but in all cases in this study, they were. The individuals in each dyad completed the valence bias task in separate rooms and using separate stimuli, but it was otherwise the same task. The kids also completed the inventory of parents and peer attachment about their parents. So here I'll just show you the data for the valence bias of the child and parent, and you can see that there's a significant positive correlation here, suggesting there's this intergenerational transmission of bias. And then we did some permutation testing, right, to see how robust is this observed correlation compared to a null distribution. So here you can see we have the parents and the kids, and the correlation is 0.26. But then we shuffled the kids with different parents, and we did this 1,000 times. And we tested the correlation of each of these pairings and took the average correlation across these 1,000 iterations and got something very close to zero. So here's the null distribution. Again, it's pretty close to zero. And we can test whether this is significantly different from the true correlation between the biologically related parents and kids. And there is a significant difference, meaning that the correlation we saw for the true dyads was unique to that relationship. But we know that not all parent-child relationships are the same, and there's a lot of variability in that relationship that might influence that intergenerational transmission. For example, the extent to which the child is securely attached to their primary caregiver. And to find out more about that, please check out our paper coming out soon in Developmental Science. And if you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. You can reach out directly to me using the contact information on the screen. Happy reading.